Hello and welcome to the Pots and Trials podcast with Jill, Sean and me, Martin.
Hi.
Hiya.
And this week I'm going to be talking to Paul Maxey from Scothern Nurseries near Lincoln all about Christmas trees, because it's that time of the year again, isn't it?
It is, and we'd just like to say a big thank you to Plant Grow, who make a range of organic mulches and composts and liquid feeds. And they're all made from plant material grown in Norfolk. So big thanks to them for supporting the podcast.
Thank you, yes.
Now, you're going to talk to Paul, aren't you, about Christmas trees?
I am.
But just tell us a little bit about how you know Paul.
Well, Paul, it's a traditional nursery garden centre. They've got the garden centre at the front and then the back, the nursery. So they are growers as well in a village near Lincoln in Scothern. It's called Scothern Nurseries and Garden Centre. And Paul is also one of the gardening experts on local radio, so on Radio Lincolnshire. He has been for many years. I knew Paul through when I was doing Radio Nottingham. I do a bit on Lincolnshire now, and Paul does the Sunday programme along with somebody else. So
they also have a very nice tea. It happens to be in the same village as our daughter and our grandchildren. So we pop in now and again, but very nice tea room. Yeah,
it's what I think is a lovely traditional garden centre where you can ask a question and you know you're going to get the answer because they grow the plants. So yeah, well worth a visit if you're in the Lincoln area.
Right, well, let's hear all about it.
So, Paul, Christmas is not that far away, and for you as a nurseryman garden centre, it's going to be very busy with Christmas trees. So do you want to tell us about different types of Christmas trees? Because years ago, there wasn't a lot of choice, but nowadays there's so much.
And 20 years ago, you would have only had the Norway spruce. That's all you had a choice of. And then it's gradually started to come in with some different ones, and one has really taken over the market, which is this Nordman, which is a lovely soft needle, much easier to look after, etc. But it's much harder to grow.
Right. Is that also slower growing than the Norway?
Yeah, just a little bit. To get a 6-foot tree of a Nordman, you're looking at about 12 years, whereas as a Norway, you're probably about 10 years.
Okay.
So it does take a little bit more. It needs a bit more trimming and a bit more looking after in the growing sense of it. But that's really taken over the market. There's probably 90% of the market is that now.
Right. And the benefit of that is that it retains its needles for longer, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's people sometimes call it a no-drop tree. There is no such thing, as we both know. It is a low-drop tree. It's got a more waxy covering to it, so it holds that needle much better. It's still no good if you put it in front of the fire. It's still going to drop its needles. But in a normal house, it will hold much better. So you can put it in at the start of November and it's still looking good when you take it out in January.
Yeah. And, you know, with these, you say they're harder to grow. I think what people don't realise is when they are being grown, then they're not just left to grow naturally. They do trim them, don't they, to get that bushy habit?
Yeah. Well, we all draw when we're kids the Christmas tree shape.
Yeah.
There is no tree that grows in that Christmas tree shape. So we have to artificially make it that way so that when people are choosing their tree, every person's idea of a perfect Christmas tree is slightly different. So we have to trim them in the fields to get them nice and neat and tidy, etc. They all need a nice stem in the middle so that you can get your star on or your whatever.
Your fairy on the top there.
Yeah, that's it. But you have to trim it. And if you have a tree and you plant it out, if you don't trim it, it'll get a very big tree and it will be for logging. It won't be for Christmas.
Right, okay. And so that's the Nordman, which is, as you say, become very popular. I mean, you have got here one of the Norway spruce. Just people still buy them because they aren't as expensive nowadays, are they?
No, they're much cheaper, much cheaper. And the people that have those are much later towards Christmas. So they're in the last 2 weeks towards Christmas because we know that they don't hold their needles as well. So it's a more economical tree, but it's still widely grown. Still a lot out there, and they're still easy to look after as well. It's just a weird question with those. If you have a cut-off one, you need to cut the base so that it will drink water like foliage does.
Right, okay.
If you don't do that, it's not going to survive well.
Right. Are we still growing lots of Christmas trees in the UK, or do lots of them come in from abroad?
There's still some coming in from abroad. I will only buy UK trees.
Yeah.
And I buy actually all Lincolnshire trees.
Oh, well done.
But there's thousands and thousands and thousands are grown in this country, and it's not when they say they grow 1,000, they won't grow 1,000. They'll have 6,000 at least, because they will have, each year they'll need 3 foot, 4 foot, 5 foot, 6 foot, etc. So you get big plantations, and they're well looked after. They manage the area. You get lots of birds and insects in those areas as well, because it helps the tree.
Yeah, exactly. So they're what we sort of deem as our traditional trees, but you've got a couple here that are a bit different, aren't they? Sort of not what we'd think of as a Christmas tree.
Well, you've got the blue spruce here, really bright blue, etc., quite prickly. Don't want that with young children.
Okay, yeah.
But it's very much in there. It's got a beautiful scent when it's inside. Really, really nice. But they are more expensive because they're slower again.
Right, okay.
And they are much more difficult to get the shape right on those. But they are available there. And then the other one that I've got actually isn't what I would normally call a Christmas tree, but we often sell it as a dwarf one, as a tabletop, etc. It's a Picea canica, which is a cone-shaped Picea, needs very little trimming and makes that perfect Christmas tree shape every year without needing to do anything.
Yeah, and that is so compact, isn't it? I can see why people use it. Or if you've got a small room or an apartment, that'd be ideal for that type of thing.
There's another variety out there as well called Picea December, which is actually got slightly redder tips, and that really is nice. Worth looking out for that one.
So I suppose the majority are what you call cut Christmas trees, and we're going to talk about tips in a few minutes, but they are literally cut with a saw from the field and sold. But then the market's also there for people buying them in containers, isn't it? Is that something that is growing?
Yeah, I don't think it's growing. I think it's still very static, but you do need to understand it, because there's several different parts. You've got the cut tree, as you say, but then you've got potted trees, and you've got pot-grown trees, which are two different things. So a pot-grown has been in that pot for a long time, up to a year. You can see roots coming out the bottom. Nice, strong one in there. A potted tree has literally been dug out of the field that week or the week before and shoved in that pot. It won't necessarily have a big root, because the people that dig it are paid by how many they do in a day, not how good a job they do. So be aware of that.
So if you're going to get one in a pot, ideally you want one that's got an established root system.
Yeah.
And are the benefits of that, you can take it into the house for a few weeks and then put it outside and it will survive?
Yes, we have quite a lot of people that have had them in the past. They take them in. You have to be careful taking them in, because you can't go straight from cold outside to very warm house. You have to bring it in stages, and when you bring it out in stages. But then they keep it for year on year. And then they can bring it back again.
Right.
I've got one customer that actually has planted theirs in a barrel, and they have a week's worth of trying to get it in the house and a week's worth trying to get it out the house.
Yeah.
But it's the same tree they've had for 10 years.
Right, yeah, which is good from an environmental point of view.
Yeah.
It means you only sell them one tree, of course, but you can sell them baubles. And
exactly, we can sell them other things.
Yeah,
we're not worried on that.
The fact is they've got a living Christmas tree, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's brilliant. So good range out there. They're going to be in the garden centres now for people to choose them. What we'll do, take a little break, then we'll come back and get some tips how to keep your Christmas tree looking fresh.
Great.
Well, coming up later in the show, Martin has got some wonderful advice about planting roses. You might be pruning your roses at the minute, but he's going to be telling you about how you can plant roses at this time of year. But I want to pick up on what Paul said about artificially shaped Christmas trees. That's ruined.
Not ruined
Christmas.
No, it has. Well, it's ruined the image of Christmas trees, because I just thought they all grew.
Yeah. And how long we spend wandering around trying to get the perfect shaped Christmas tree.
And then when you get it into the house, you have to keep turning it round and turning it round to get it in the right way. But they don't grow like that, apparently.
Well, we used to do them like that, but it's a modern thing because people want perfection with their Christmas tree. Yeah. So they don't want one that's suddenly got a branch growing out at a bit of an angle or something like that pokes you in the eye when you walk by to top your sherry glass.
That's all part of the
fun. So they now trim them. So they're not pruning them hard, but as they grow, what they do in the spring, they just tip almost to create the triangular shape. They just tip the stems and then they bush out. So you get a much fuller, bushier tree rather than one that's got big gaps between the branches.
Yeah.
So,
Makes sense.
which takes them a bit longer to grow. Hence the reason you pay a bit more for these quality trees.
I did a little video from our local Christmas tree farm last year, which is on YouTube or somewhere. Which it's just really nice seeing them in the rows.
I really like the idea of the tabletop one. So how big are they? You're saying tabletop, but so you don't want it very big. If people haven't got a big space for a proper tree, a big tree, then to have one on a little... I'm imagining on a...
You can get them from sort of, less than a foot tall up to 3 or 4 feet.
Okay.
It depends how old that particular conifer is. But the Picea conica that he mentioned is quite a slow-growing one. It's one that people would often plant on a rock garden or as a slow-growing conifer.
Right.
But, you often see them, don't you, in garden centres and shops, these little potted ones that are only tiny, tiny little ones.
My wife got sent one during COVID to decorate herself because they were all doing Zoom. So instead of having a Christmas work do, they were all sent a miniature Christmas tree, a little bit of tinsel, and they decorated it, and then it was in the shot on Zoom.
I mean, it is lovely to have a real Christmas tree, isn't it? Because you get that lovely aroma in there, and you feel that you've got something living in there. And what I was really impressed with, Paul buys them all from Lincolnshire. I mean, he's obviously a Lincolnshire nurseryman, Lincolnshire Garden Centre, and he tries to source as much as he can locally, which I take my hat off to him for.
Okay. I mean, and what's this thing about potted or pot grown? What's the deal there then?
Potted is essentially when they dig a tree up and just put it in a pot. So they literally dig it out of the ground, stick it in a pot, sell it, so the roots have still been disturbed. Whereas if it's pot grown from a young plant, it's been in a pot and grown and it's got an established root system, so it isn't going to wilt if and die as long as you keep it watered, of course.
It
will grow.
So it's got a better chance of surviving.
Oh, you can keep that from year to year.
So do garden centres, do they have to say which it is?
I would think a good garden centre would say that.
Well, that's quite important.
But there may be
isn't it?
some. I'm not. But some of the maybe the sheds and the bigger garden centres probably won't know when they get them in because it will just be a Christmas tree in a pot. Whereas Paul knows where his buying is from, so he knows they are pot grown.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Fabulous. Well, if you've got a question for Martin or the team, drop us an email. info@potsandtrials.com is the email address. And then we've got some questions.
We have. We've
got far away.
We've got one from Audrey in Lincolnshire. So thanks for letting us know where you are, Audrey. It's always a good help.
A bit of a Lincolnshire theme today.
Well,
isn't
it is a bit actually, isn't it? But it's a lawn question. And she's asking, is it too late to feed the lawn?
Yes.
Oh, okay. There you go, Audrey. Put your feet
if it's
up.
a winter feed. Or...
Well, here we are now. We are now early December. So it is a bit too late, I'm afraid, Audrey.
Okay.
Even if you wouldn't use a winter feed, you'd use an autumn feed, which you'd use September and October. But now, your grass has more or less stopped growing. It's still growing a little bit, but it's more or less stopped. So I would wait now and feed in the spring. And if you want to feed in the autumn in the future, because it is good to feed in the autumn because it's got a higher potash and a phosphate content, which builds up the strength of the grass, get a really good root system. So it helps to get it through the winter. If you want to do that in the future, do it next September or October, then it will be working lovely by this time of the year.
Okay, so Audrey, get a cup of tea, piece of cake, put your feet up and look at your lawn and think, I'll do it in the spring.
Yeah, sounds like a plan. Sounds like a plan. Another question from Nottinghamshire this time, from Jan, and Jan's asking about a black lace Sambucus Black Lace. I don't know if I've said that right. It's getting rather tall, and they're wondering if it can be pruned back, and if so, how much and when? When would you do that?
Yeah, what was it called again?
It says Sambucus Black Lace.
Isn't that a drink?
Well, that's I know Sambucus.
That's the one you set fire to, isn't it?
This is Sambucus with an S on it. Don't get them confused. That's why you get drunk so much.
Oh my goodness! Right, big mistake to make.
So Sambucus, and it is. It's essentially a Sambucus is an elderberry, but these are the ornamental fancy leaf ones. And black lace has got really deep purple, almost black leaf that's cut fine, lovely, frilly leaf. So it's a really nice one. In fact, there's one I can just see out in the garden that's just got a few leaves left on it over there by the fence.
Oh, yes. Those
and they
sticks,
do get quite big if you allow them.
Well, obviously it's lost its leaves, so you'll do it.
Slightly technical.
I'm a professional gardener, you know. They do get quite, if you let them grow, they will get to be quite big. So, but it is one that responds really well to pruning.
Okay.
So normally you wouldn't do it at this time of the year. You would normally wait until spring. But elderberry is as tough as old boots. So if you cut it back now, it isn't going to kill it. It will just burst into life come the spring.
And if you, because the flowers, when it flowers, it has lovely pinky purple flowers, and they're really nice to add into a batch of elderflower cordial if you're making it, because it gives the cordial a lovely pinky colour. It hasn't got as much flavour as the ordinary white elderflower, so don't use all pink. But 2 or 3 of the flower heads will make it a nice colour.
And not as much flavour as the Sambucus shop.
No, it doesn't have the same effect on you.
No, absolutely. One last question, sort of more of a conversation rather than a question, perhaps, from Valerie Cousins on one of our YouTube videos. Do you have a video on pruning the Everbearing raspberry? Now, Valerie doesn't say where they are in the world, so I'm not sure exactly when or where or how.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting question, that. I mean, the answer is no. We haven't done a video on Everbearing, video on pruning them. And I had to think, what is an Everbearing? Because you get Everbearing strawberries, which basically keep cropping all the way through the summer, little and often. And I was thinking, I don't know of an Everbearing raspberry. We get summer raspberries and we get the autumn raspberries. But having done a little bit of research, I think some of them are now being branded as Everbearers. And essentially, they are the autumn fruiting raspberries. So you plant them in the normal time, prune them down in the spring. And the difference between a summer fruiting and an autumn fruiting is the autumn fruiting produce the fruit from August, September onwards on the new growth that it's made that season. So you can cut them down in the spring. It'll make a long shoot that fruits that year. The summer fruiting raspberries produce the fruit on the previous season's growth. So in the year one, it makes the growth. The second year, it has the fruit on it. And at the same time, it's producing new shoots that will fruit the following year. So what you do with those is you cut out the old fruited ones and you always got the new ones for the following year. And I think these Everbearing ones are varieties of autumn fruiting ones. And what you do with them to get them to be partly Everbearing is they will fruit in the autumn, September, October. Normally in March, you would cut them down to ground level and start again. If you don't cut them down or only cut half of them down, so sort of every other one, you'll get the new growth that will fruit in the autumn, but the ones that you've left will produce little side shoots with some fruit on in the summer. Yeah. So you can get 2 crops. Now, I've heard people talk about this. My only thought with that is you're putting an awful lot of strain on that plant to produce 2 crops a year instead of 1. So I think you've got to feed it more, mulch it more, really nurture them. But yeah, you can get 2 crops off, but I know them as autumn fruiting, but I think they are being branded now as a marketing thing as Everbearing, certainly in England anyway.
Okay. Well, that, makes sense for that. But the simple answer to have we got a video on it is no. But anyway, I think we need to go back and hear a bit more from Paul about these Christmas trees.
So, Paul, you mentioned there's no such thing as a complete needle retention, or they all drop at some point. So if you've got your Christmas tree, you get it in your room, how can we keep it healthy, in good condition, and try and keep that needle drop to a minimum?
Right. The first thing we need to do is think where it's going. So we need to, if we've got a fire, if we've got a radiator, we need to think what's going to happen, where it is. If you can turn that radiator down, great, that's going to make life a lot easier for yourself. If there's a corner that's a colder corner in a room, even better still. And then we need to think about this particular thing that's been cut off or in a pot or whatever, it needs water. If you buy flowers or foliage, you immediately take it home, cut the bottom, put them in water, and they last for weeks and weeks and weeks. Christmas trees are exactly the same, it's just a bit bigger. So obviously the Nordman types and the Fraser types and the Picea types, they are better at holding. but they will still be even better still if you can make a clean cut on the bottom, because when a tree is cut, it seals itself against bacteria infection. It doesn't know it's been cut up and being moved around. It thinks a branch has come off. And then if you can get that clean cut, the water is drunk up through there. It'll take a couple of pints a day, a big 6-foot tree.
Right, yeah.
And then you can then put it in a pot that's suitable for it. So you can either use any bucket you like and then cover that. Just make sure you check it that it's got no holes in. Cost me a carpet one year. So, just need to check that. Or you can buy proper ones for Christmas trees, which we've got one in front of us, which is one where you put your Christmas tree in, you can put water in with it, and you have screw-in clamps that hold it tight. Now, I recommend always when people do these, when you mostly buy your Christmas trees these days, they're in a sleeve. So we put all of ours in a sleeve when people have picked them. Keep it in the sleeve till you've got it in the pot. Then you don't get your ears prickled as you're doing it.
Good tip.
And then you can get it nicely. You can carry it straight in the house without it bashing all the doors apart, and then take it off and you're in the right place and it's nice and easy to look after.
Yeah, that's a good tip. And with these that hold the water, then you've just got to keep topping it up every few days, make sure that it's always got water in there.
Yep, agree. What I tend to do is sort of lay down on the floor, put my finger in.
Yeah.
If it comes out wet, that's fine. Don't need to do anything. And then you just keep topping it up every so often. If not, get the kids to crawl underneath. They don't mind.
And what about the length of time? Because some people vary when they put trees in. Some like them only in a few days before Christmas, so it feels really magical on Christmas Day. Some people like them in very early, don't you know, sort of get to the end of November, beginning of December, they've got to have the Christmas tree in. If they go in earlier, there's more chance they're going to lose the needles, presumably.
Oh, yeah, a lot more. If you're going to go in at end of November, start of December, which is getting much more popular. People are decorating their houses much earlier. You have to go in with a low drop type tree. So you're going to have to go in with a Nordman style to get in there. If you went in a Norway spruce, it will be bald by the time we get to Christmas. Personally, I'm a Christmas Eve man, always have been. But my kids won't let me get away with that. I have to go in 2 weeks before, which is the general thing. Somewhere around the 8th to the 10th of December is the peak time for Christmas trees going in. But it's getting earlier and earlier every year.
Yeah, I mean, it is beautiful to have a real tree in the house, isn't it? Because you get the fragrance of the foliage and it's something living in the house.
Yeah.
Years ago, they might not exist anymore, Paul. You'll know because you're up to date with the trade. You used to be able to spray them with to stop the needles falling off. Are they still available or are they all gone?
No, we used to have something called wilt proof that we used to spray on them, and it used to hold the needles really nicely in there, and you could sort of almost have the needles on there for 2 weeks and extra, and it wouldn't make any difference. No, not available anymore. Can't spray it now. We've got to do it by the old-fashioned way of looking after it properly.
So the secret is as cool a place as possible. Let it hydrate first. Don't put it in too early and keep it moist around the base, and you're away.
That's it. Yep, you've got it then, and you are well sorted. And don't forget, of course, post-Christmas, there's lots of places now to recycle your tree. I know there's quite a few where they're using it in seedy fences and against riverbanks to hold the banks in together.
Yeah.
And there are places where they are mulching it and then using it to go on soils and so on. So it it can have a second life afterwards. Don't think it's got to be just left.
So it's not just for Christmas.
Not just for Christmas, it's for the rest of the year.
Thank you, Paul.
So coming up, Martin's got some jobs with roses. So we'll be having a floral, gorgeous garden next summer, won't we? With doing those jobs for roses. Sean, do you have a real tree in your house? Because we haven't had a real tree for a few years.
Yes, we have a real tree.
Right.
We go to the local farm and we see it cut down, so we know that it's been grown there. But it's just nice. I like the smell of it. We like to, we like all of that stuff. And it's very fresh if you go and see it cut
We do,
down.
but now we're not allowed one.
Well, I do.
We always
love
had our
it.
own.
Well, now the kitchen's finished, I think your tree would go, you could have a real tree and replace that plastic. Is it plastic, that one?
Yeah.
it is.
Replace it with a real one in this corner over here, just behind the camera.
I think so, yeah.
It's the smell, I think, that I love more than anything else.
Do you not like
I do
hoovering
miss
up the
that.
pine needles
Yeah, I
as
love
well?
that.
We were spoiled, weren't we? Because for many, many
Yeah.
years we had a nursery and we'd got a block of land and we grew Christmas trees or some. So we'd go up with the kids and we'd decide that's
Yeah.
the one we want, cut it down, take it into the house.
And it was free.
And it was free.
So I think that's the problem. It's going from having a free tree
But,
every
you know,
year to
They
having
are
to pay for
expensive,
them.
but then
They
I
are.
understand why. You know, we've heard Paul talking about it. I mean, you need to spend a lot of time. And was it 7 years before the
Yeah,
tree is kind of
exactly,
ready,
yeah.
and then maybe longer if you want
Yeah.
a bigger one. I mean, it's a long time to
Yeah.
nurture something, isn't it?
I think we
Yeah.
could have both, Jill.
Oh.
I think we could have one in the living room, one in the kitchen.
Well, I fancy one of those little ones in a pot
And one on the table. I think
that
the
would
more
look
I
quite
loved
nice.
them.
Yeah.
So,
Or
yeah.
you could grow one outside
Well,
and
and
then
we'll just bring it in.
Oh well, we always decorate a couple of trees outside as well.
Can
so-
we do a compromise then?
Oh, dear.
We will have a real Christmas tree, but I'll get a pot grown one rather than a potted.
Okay.
And then it can go into the garden by the greenhouse in a pot in
Yeah.
the summer, and that won't drop needles. And I think we'll do that.
Okay, all right. And then, so do you recycle yours? Because Paul was telling us about, things that they use with recycled trees. So sort of...
They were using them to stabilise the banks on rivers, and
which I
things,
didn't
as the
realise.
branches to
And just
hold-
as mulches as well, so they're
Yeah.
all shredded down, used as mulches.
I think I might have mentioned this on last year's podcast, but I'm going to say what I did in case there's new listeners. We have an old Victorian house with a bay window, and the tree lives in a bay window, which is quite a cool area because obviously the windows mean that it's drafty, and it's not that drafty, but it's a cooler area of the house, so it lasts longer. And what I do is I bring the composting wheelie bin outside the bay window, I open the bay window, and bit by bit I snip it down, branch by branch, and just put it straight through the window into the compost bin.
Okay.
So we compost it.
You're doing it yourself.
Yes, we
But
are composting
I
it.
think some councils in the UK
They will take them.
come and collect them, won't
What
they?
we found is our council will take them, but by the time when you drag it through the house, even
Yeah.
if you end up with the needles everywhere.
Yeah.
And I found this just straight out the window works
Okay.
really, really
Good
well.
idea.
However, they do take them, but sometimes we've noticed our neighbour leaves it out for the bin men to recycle, and it can be there weeks.
It's just as well you don't live on the 6th floor then, isn't it?
Yeah, this is true. Yeah, well, it's just still be thrown out of the
Yeah,
window.
well, exactly, yeah. Yes. Yeah, I think definitely two a year from now on.
Okay.
Do you know how much the Christmas tree is roughly?
Well,
we haven't bought one for...
It's only about 4 or 5 years since we stopped buying them.
Well, you've saved a fortune.
Might be a bit more.
Yeah.
No, I don't know, because artificial ones are relatively expensive anyway. aren't they, to
but
buy?
we got ours in the sales in January, so it was cheap.
Come on, move on swiftly.
Okay, roughly £50 for a 6-foot tree.
Well, that's...
Okay.
How much do you spend
Okay.
on your haircut, Mrs. Fish, and your hair when you have your...
Shots fired. Shots fired.
Is it not worth every penny?
Just think, if you had one less cut, you could have a Christmas tree.
Have you got some jobs for us?
Let's move swiftly on.
Yes. I'm going to plant a Christmas tree in the garden.
Oh, Sean.
And in 7 years' time, you'll have a wonderful...
Exactly. Well, we do actually decorate the big yew tree, don't we?
We
with
do.
lights, so yes. Right, well, it's got a bit of a rosy theme, really, this one has. I'm going to start with something not rosy and finish with the roses. If you've got things in your greenhouse, a few weeks ago we put lots of plants that needed a bit of frost protection in our greenhouse, which you can find on our YouTube video, mainly agapanthus and that type of thing in pots. Just check them. Just make sure that they're all okay in there. They will stand it without any heat. They just need that little bit of protection of the glass. And if we do get some warm sunny days, just open the greenhouse, because ventilation is really important. You need air movement. You can get very stale and damp in a greenhouse at this time of the year. So a bit of air movement. Close them at night, obviously. And if we are getting some heavy frost forecast, and you've got plants that need that little bit of extra protection, get some of that horticultural fleece and just wrap it around them or drape it over them just to give them a little bit of extra protection. It's like having a duvet over them. Roses, I'm a great believer that it's late autumn, early winter, you should give them a trim, a prune. So I'm going to be out doing ours in the garden, and I'm just cutting them back by half. So these are the hybrid teas, the floribundas. If you've got shrub roses, they can be given a trim. So we're just reducing the bulk so they don't blow around too much in the wind. And it also takes off the last of the dead flower heads and tidies them up a little bit. So that's something you can be doing with your roses now. But it's also, now we're in December, the bare root planting season is here. So roses can be grown and sold in pots or bare root. Bare root ones are always much cheaper, and I think they establish really well. So get your bare root roses. You can get them from garden centres or order them online from specialist growers. And now is the perfect time to plant them, because although we think everything's stopped growing, the soil is sufficiently warm enough to encourage some roots to grow, ready for spring growth.
I think we've done a video on planting bare root roses.
I think
on
we
the Pots
did,
and Trials
yes,
videos
last year. So yeah, have a
fairly
look at
sure
that.
we
Make a
have.
note to put that in our show notes.
Yes,
That's,
make a note for that.
Can I do a shout out for my favourite rose?
Of course you can.
Yes.
Because it was recommended to us. Well, it was growing in some friends of ours from our old village in North Yorkshire, Malcolm and Jenny, who I think might listen to our podcast.
Hello, Malcolm.
If not,
Hello,
why
Malcolm
not?
and Jenny. And they had a lovely rose called Tottering by Gently. And it's just gorgeous, isn't it? It's very gentle and it has lots and lots of flowers. Just the sort of it's called a single.
It's a single pale yellow flower.
It's
It's
lovely.
beautiful.
It's been
It
and
is
we've
subtle.
planted one. We've planted a few roses in our sort of new borders, and that's done really well this year, first year in. And I think that's my favourite.
Yeah, and it has done very well. And we always think it reminds us of your mother, doesn't it, when she was going a little more.
Yes,
She's totter
tottering
along
by
really
gently.
gently.
And that's one that stuck in my head, because I know from editing videos that
Yes.
we've made of roses that sometimes I've been able to put the names on, and that one I remember that one. So
It's
as soon
a
as you
lovely
said my
name.
favourite, I knew exactly which one you were going to say. Oh, fabulous. Do remember, if you've got a question for Martin or the team, drop us an email, info@potsandtrials.com. And if you have the chance to do as a review, just leaving a few stars for us, five
Would
or
be
so would be
lovely.
wonderful.
Yeah.
But no, it just helps the podcast reach a few more people.
It does. And if you like our podcast, please tell all your friends about
Yeah,
it
do
as well.
share
Spread
it,
the
yeah.
word. If you don't like it, don't mention it to them. But if you do, spread the word.
What's the old joke? Yeah, if you like it, I've been Martin Fisher. If you didn't like what we're doing, I'm Alan Titchmarsh.
And with that, we're going to say goodbye, because I think we're about out of things this
We are.
week,
I
aren't
think
we, to
we
talk
are.
about? So
Yeah.
See you
we'll be
next
back
time.
next time. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Watch the videos on YouTube or Facebook, follow us on Instagram, Twitter or X, and subscribe to the podcast and never miss a thing. For more information, go to potsandtrials.com.